When it comes to systems, you want something that will start showing results fast. You're looking for a tool that can enable your 3PL or warehouse to get to the next level. So why wait? That's why Carton Cloud provides supported, fast onboarding that can have your WMS up and running in hours, not months. Jump into Carton Cloud's easy-to-use workflows for all of your services, including cross-docking, serialized inventory tracking, e-commerce order fulfillment, and more. This software is built by logistics people for logistics people, and those logistics people are standing by to help train you and support you so that you can be successful with your customer. With 24/7 real-time reporting and free online training, you need to check out Carton Cloud for your operation. Take the next step in your operation by heading to cartoncloud.com/free-demo or click the link in the show notes.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Daniel Sokolovsky, who is the co-founder and CEO at Warp. And we're going to talk a little bit about Warp and how they're changing the LTL game a little bit, you could say. And we're going to dive into kind of the future of freight and what freight looks like now and how LTL has kind of evolved over time and how Warp is kind of coming in to play to help with a little bit of that evolution and connect some of these networks that otherwise maybe have not been connected in the past. So Daniel, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you very much, Kevin. Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to get you on. Happy to talk to you about Warp and what you guys have been up to. But for people that are not familiar with Warp, why don't you give us kind of a brief overview of what it is that you all do?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, we've built a logistics system primarily focused on helping brands and retailers move their goods as effectively as possible. We do a lot in LTL. Specifically, what we've done there is we've created an LTL network consisting of cross-dock facilities or terminals, as well as local operations and over-the-road operations that we utilize to basically go out and be able to group these shipments up together and create a better LTL solution for a shipper. So locally right now, we do regular pickup and delivery, just like every other LTL carrier would, except we enhance it significantly with optimized routing, more flexible schedules, and then time-definite line hauls, right? We're going out and trying to make sure that the times that we commit to are the times that we're actually meeting. But on top of that, also giving shippers the flexibility of different times in order to go out and impact the price that they're willing to pay. So if some people want it faster, great, we can ship it faster. Others are okay to pay less but get a lower speed or a slower speed. That's fine with us too. And so really the way we think about it is an LTL network on steroids that we can effectively use to help scheduled, consistent shippers get their goods to their retail establishment as efficiently as possible.
Interesting. I love that LTL network on steroids. So pumping up those LTL movements for sure. And you're the co-founder at Warp. So why don't you give us kind of a little background on that and tell us kind of, where the idea for Warp came about? Where did you see kind of a pain point within the industry and you wanted to kind of go after this problem and try and solve it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have a background in logistics. I grew up in this industry. For the last 7 years, really from 2015 to 2021, I focused on last mile delivery and creating a last mile delivery network. And basically, as COVID, obviously blew up volume and skyrocketed our growth, one of the big challenges that we were having was actually the middle mile, right? So for shippers that can afford to ship a full truckload to one of our sort centers or to one of the regions that we were working in, fine, we'd be able to service them effectively, be at a better quality and lower price point than the nationals or the regionals. But really what happened was that for shippers that were based, for instance, in Salt Lake, but wanted to use us in LA and didn't have enough volume to consistently fill up a full truckload, the economics actually ended up favoring just staying with the national like UPS or FedEx. And so effectively, we had created this idea where we can effectively aggregate and batch volume around these fulfillment centers and aggregate multiple shippers together on one truck and give them the option to use whichever last mile provider they wanted to, right? They can go out, integrate with, either a national and zone skip with them, or we would enable work with these more kind of newer age, really regional last mile providers. And so as the business started growing, we obviously got into a recessionary period, right? I think that's no surprise in the US recession, and consumer spending kind of decreased. But really where we found our foothold was helping brick and mortar businesses. So everybody from, like I mentioned, brands and retailers to some manufacturers and things like that are looking to effectively distribute palletized product to retail stores or to smaller micro fulfillment centers, smaller fulfillment centers, things like that. And it's where we really found our foothold. And more recently, we've also been doing a pretty significant amount of basically oversized home deliveries, right? So delivering furniture, delivering kind of used commercial goods on a pallet to these shippers. And really like the flexibility that our network has enabled us is, our price point is significantly cheaper than your XPOs, your Old Dominions of the world.
Yeah.
Our quality is on par with XPO or Old Dominion, if not higher. And our tracking and our visibility is significantly better, right? Like we provide GPS for the pickup, we provide GPS location for the drop off, and then we provide a pretty, consistent travel schedule for the middle mile portions, right? Whether if it's moving from one region to the other. And really kind of, I would say it's been a lot of hats off to our existing vendor base, right? We've been able to go out and build up a network of vendors who, are made up of different types. We have some who are, operating cargo vans and box trucks within local areas, 53-footers that are running over the road, both refrigerated and dry cross-docking facilities across the country that we use to aggregate this product. And we're building an LTL company much more efficiently than it used to be, right? We don't have the significant cost of the CapEx and the OpEx that, look at how much the yellow facilities were on auction for.
Yeah.
$15 to $20 million per piece.
Yeah.
We're launching to market for single digit thousands of dollars, right? And being able to very nimbly enter and kind of go through that process. And I think it's something that the industry has wanted for a while, right? LTL has been not the best topic for shippers for many years. And I think there's pull from the industry, and I think it's also we're in an age and day now where the technology is around that we can actually do these kind of things, do kind of high intensity calculations on the fly, provide mobile apps, provide web apps for the different partners within our network, and be able to stitch it all together in real time. And I would say LTL is a much more complicated problem than last mile is, right? Because you're thinking about multiple steps to go through, multiple journeys that a specific piece of freight can take. And as you try to digitize those journeys, digitize those options and the optionality, there's a lot of opportunity with that.
Very interesting. Yeah. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's interesting too, because, you mentioned some of the guys there that have been around for a long time, and, you're coming in and bringing this kind of tech layer to it, which I think makes a lot of sense. And, it's easier to pivot when you're coming in fresh a little bit and give a new spin on it. And I think it's really interesting how you're doing that and tapping into capacity that was kind of there already, but in a different type of way, and enabling that to happen. And now you mentioned the middle mile in there a little while back, and I'm curious, because there's so much, and I think in the past few years, especially with the e-commerce exploding, there's been so much talk about last mile, final mile, and all these things, right? But as you just said, the kind of that middle mile, the LTL portion is really becomes more complicated in a sense than the actual final mile, last mile delivery. So talk to us a little bit about, that relationship and how optimizing that middle mile and getting the middle mile right can really set you up for better success on like the last mile and final mile.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I think I just want to clarify a couple different things. There's parcel transportation, there's pallet transportation, right? So a lot of people kind of openly talk about last mile, first mile, middle mile, right? All those different things. And really, it's, in my eyes, which mile it is about like which piece of the journey is this piece taking, right? And it's less so about the type of inventory that you're moving and things like that, because there's one network for parcel delivery, there's a network for freight delivery, but the opportunity actually and where those two networks intersect is specifically in the middle mile, right? First mile pickup of a parcel versus pickup of a pallet are entirely different things, right? You're basically, a driver can pick up a box, right? Like a UPS driver comes into your office, picks up a box and goes. And then for the final mile piece, right, it's a UPS driver going out, dropping off a box at your doorstep versus a pallet that's being moved with a lift gate. But what they do have in common, both of these networks, is that middle mile portion. Because once that UPS driver is picking up from your office, they're taking it back to a sortation facility, they're taking all the product, they're consolidating it as much as possible, and they're filling up trucks. And this either on pallets or basically are floor loaded. Similar side on the inverse, right? Those trucks are arriving into final mile sortation facilities or final mile kind of destinations, and then eventually getting broken down, and each individual box is delivered to you as a customer. But for a shipper specifically, what I believe that they really need to be thinking about is, how does their freight even move to where it's supposed to go, right? So somebody who's involved in brick and mortar shipping is very frequently shipping pallets of goods, right? At least one or two pallets, and sometimes more than that. Where are those DCs located that you're shipping out of, right? Where exactly are the stores that you're going to, that you're shipping to? Which LTL network are you using right now? Are you going out and figuring out a different way for your inventory to arrive more regional so that you can save money on your LTL, but then use a provider locally to go out and actually distribute it or disperse it to wherever it needs to go? And so I think like very common mistakes that people are making essentially right now is it's kind of across the board, right? You have this like weird complex sophistication around parcel shippers where FedEx and UPS are like the inherent national providers, and if you want to deliver to the whole nation, you're almost stuck using them anyways. And then what they do is, if you want to negotiate rates, they put volume minimums on there, right? So they almost kind of FedEx and UPS have created such a moat by having nationwide reach around some of these parcel shippers that it's impossible to really get out of their binds unless you solve it using middlemen, right? Unless you're going out, transporting your inventory closer to where it's going to, you figure out, a good system around that, and then you're using, local or more regionalized last mile providers that are different than the nationals. But the thing is, when you're thinking about that kind of strategy, if you're a lower volume shipper that wants to ship every single day of the week and offer every single customer 2-day shipping, you're still locked into FedEx or UPS, because no matter how efficient you can make your middle mile, you're either going to sacrifice the amount of days per week that you're going into this region, or you're going to sacrifice the amount of dollars that you're paying in order to hit that region all 5, 6, 7 days a week, right? And so that's basically where you get into this kind of a little bit of a cluster. And so what we've really identified is omni-channel brands that have both brick and mortar presence and e-commerce presence can actually join those two networks together for their middle mile, utilize the exact same trucks that are going out to deliver to stores, to deliver to these retail locations, and put their parcel freight in the exact same vehicle, right? And basically move it to wherever it needs to go, call it from Cincinnati or Pennsylvania, wherever it may be, to California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, and New York, and be able to get the benefit of already having to send the truck, already having to bear the cost of that truck, merging everything together onto one, and then adding your final mile provider who's in the New York market as an additional stop in the same way that you'd be dropping off to one of your stores. And so this strategy is really something I think that, people have been attempting for a long time, right? FedEx has forever run FedEx Freight, FedEx Parcel, but due to a lack of a digital infrastructure and an infrastructure that basically is constantly looking, constantly re-optimizing everything, it's really hard to actually do that, because your time in transit commitments are different, your pieces of freight are different, the work required to deliver each thing are different. And until you can really standardize that under one system, it's almost impossible to do. And so I think what Warp, the relief that Warp provides to this business is, first off, we've created a digital infrastructure that understands all of these individual kind of nuances, right? We've created a network that sits below that digital infrastructure that is pretty flexible, right? We can send a cargo van if we need it because it's a smaller volume pickup, or a 53-footer if it's like more volume, right? At the same time, we can run the network temp controlled or dry, right? And so you have all this kind of configurations that you can do, which has made it a lot easier for the shippers to be able to say, hey, here's all the shipments that I have. Here's my boxes, my parcels. Here are my pallets that need to go to the stores. Hey, Warp, can you figure out how do I need to get up there? And that's really where a lot of the values that we're providing is figuring out between your entire freight network, how can you do it differently? How can you use our network wherever possible and still have your choice of, whoever else you want to use?
Super smart. Yeah. I mean, I think it's totally kind of optimizing that overall movement in a sense, right? I mean, especially in that omni-channel aspect that you were talking about, being able to bring those two together is certainly, going to reduce, I think, cost overall, I would imagine, for the shipper, and being able to be more optimized on that side. And, having that digital layer and that digital kind of infrastructure around it, like you mentioned, certainly allows you to make the best decision to be able to do that and then figure out how to make that happen. Whereas, maybe traditionally you would have to split those two things apart and be in two different trucks, and maybe one truck's not even full all the way, and you're basically wasting capacity and wasting space, right, by shipping just air. So really, really smart how you're approaching that and taking that into consideration, and being able to have that flexibility to adjust, like you said, whether it's, bringing in a short truck, bringing in a 53 footer or a box truck, whatever that needs to be done for that day or whatever load is present, I think makes a lot of sense. So you're solving kind of for those problems that have been, I guess you could say, ongoing in the industry now for a little while, right? But as we start to look at the kind of future of things, I mean, what would you say the future of freight looks like?
We'll be back after a quick break.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Do you want more warehouse content delivered to your inbox? Sign up for our new email series called Warehouse Wisdom Wednesday to get an educational series of emails on warehouse basics delivered directly to you every Wednesday morning. Find the sign up link in the show notes.
Yeah, so I think, no one has a crystal ball, right? I think if we had a crystal ball,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have to sit, and do this today. So I think that's a big thing. But my thought process is going out and looking at the patterns and what's been going on in the past, right? And call it the past 10 to 15 years to really dictate, what may happen or what's more likely to happen in the future. And the way I see it is basically this: you have parcel delivery that's really changed significantly. So what happened a few years ago when COVID first started was that huge amount of entrants came into the business, right?
Yeah.
It was already a relatively competitive market, but it was always competing between nationals or regionals. And then all of a sudden you had a huge amount of entrants, call it Axel Hire, Jitsu, Vihos, that entered in, that are now creating their own kind of like clustering, right? And Better Trucks is another option that have created their smaller regional clusters. And so you have this kind of competitive mix of small local providers that are similar to Amazon's DSPs. You have kind of regionalized providers, some that are digitized, some that aren't. And then you still have your two national or three national providers if you count the Postal Service. And effectively, what you have there is that you have cost increasing with the nationals. You have cost increasing with these smaller, more local ones, because they're just a function of, cost of labor, cost of fuel, cost of transportation, or cost of the vehicle, right? And so, from interest rates, interest rates are higher, gas is higher, labor costs are higher. So obviously their cost is going up. And where you really have an opportunity is with these kind of more tech-enabled, regionalized guys that can actually drive cost optimization from getting additional density, from changing the way that they do things and the strategy that they take. So I think you have this kind of glaring situation where shippers would like to use these smaller providers, but still have a middle mile problem if their facility is located somewhere outside of that region or wherever else it may be. So let's table that. That's one basically systemic problem that's existing on its own. You have another problem where the full truckload business has just collapsed, right? Last year, it went through such a skyrocketing moment during COVID, and I think so many people were opportunistic about increasing price, charging more money, getting more trucks on the road, getting more drivers on the road, and hold this whole process that we're still now seeing the effect of that, right? Shippers not just are shipping less full truckload, but at the same time, the cost of that, because of this decrease in demand, has significantly dropped to pre-COVID levels. You have also brokerages that kind of, the value used to be for a broker that, hey, we had a network, we have all these people that we can go to, we can get you a lower cost base, to now the broker says, hey, actually the shippers can go directly to the load boards, right? A shipper can go to DAT now, a shipper can use a TMS. So like all of that value of the network that a broker was providing to you is getting less and less existent. At the same time, the carriers themselves are getting better and better technologies, right? And so they're starting to be able, like, a few years ago, a broker was the one that was spending the money on the technology, and the carriers would provide data back to it. Yeah. Now that the technology cost has decreased, and the carriers are starting to have the same exact tools available to them, what is stopping a shipper from going on a load board and going directly with the carrier and just getting a tracking link back from them in the same way that they would? So the value of a broker is starting to diminish. There's too many trucks on the road as it is, and so that's like the full truckload, both carrier and broker problem. Then you also have the LTL problem, which is you have, Yellow kind of went out of business. You have about 20 to 25 good providers. And by good, I mean like, sizable, can offer you coverage, can give you flexibility, but service is questionable, right? So you have your Central Transports of the world and, kind of like within that category, lower cost, lower quality providers, significant amount of damages, low visibility, low predictability. And then the ones who do solve all those pain points, like, are actually meeting the times that they commit to, are actually being able to deliver properly, can actually give you visibility, are charging you an arm and a leg, where if you have 2 or 3 shipments, you might as well get a full truckload anyways, right? And so you have like this disparity happening there. So that's like, parcel, FTL, LTL. And now let's dive into the technology.
Yeah.
The technology now, there's been so many dollars invested into this technology that the vast majority of it is available off the shelf now, right? And when you think about AI, when you think about, load boards, when you think about GPS tracking, mobile apps, all of those individual, the ELD is also kind of what they've been able to do in the industry. There's really, that tech has really been able to go out and commoditize a lot of this industry, right? A lot of that value that was being provided from knowing this nuance, or knowing this particular carrier in this area, or knowing this weather problem, or whatever else it may be, are now basically, available ubiquitously via technology tools that are costing $50 to $150 a month. So less money. So for less money per month that you would spend to give to a broker on one load, you are basically being able to get all the value that they would provide to you and some, right? Because you still have control of your network. You still maintain your own carrier relationships. You can still negotiate better when you want to. And so looking at kind of this like spread of all these different service options, what the reality is, what's the situation, what I think is about to happen is that first, shippers go directly to the carriers more and more. Okay, so brokers basically continue to kind of decrease. There's obviously value still within specialized freight, right? I don't think that's coming off the table anytime soon, because it's not as commoditized essentially, right? But all your FTL, LTL, you don't need a broker anymore. Go directly to the carrier. Your parcel, you're going out there, you're trying to figure out how can I go out and do, last mile with these other smaller providers. And so what I think happens is that, and I'm hoping that Warp is the tool that can enable all of this to happen, right?
Yeah.
But as we see a merge across all of these different service modes. So LTL, FTL, parcel start traveling the longer distances in the same equipment. And what happens is that in the like more localized areas, call it, once the truck is ready in California from Pennsylvania, whatever else it may be, at that moment you can cross dock it, right, or deconsolidate it and then separate it out to go wherever that it eventually needs to go. But I think we're getting there probably in the next 2, 3, 4 years. And I think routing guides start becoming a thing of the past once this dynamic routing, dynamic optimization is a big thing. I think that on the shipper's perspective, they already have so many people internally working to like figure out service, quality, what's going on with on-time delivery, all of those pieces, that those teams become a lot better and can start looking at the different modes across the board. I think that once rail and ocean is already getting like pretty tech forward, but rail is still a little bit behind.
Yeah.
Once we see rail getting more tech enabled and kind of more similar to ocean, and we see already what's happening with air, you have effectively like an omni-channel, multimodal, multi-capable supply chain that, using digital optimization, consolidates all of those as much as possible, uses the best means to move freight into regions, and then the best means within those regions to actually deliver them to wherever it needs to go, whether it's a business with a dock, and lift gates required, or sorry, not a lift, a 53 footer, or it's a business without a dock and a lift gates required, or it's a consumer's doorstep. I think that the freight is arriving to the city on the same equipment.
Very interesting insight there. I mean, I think, it sounds like, I love the idea, like you're saying, it's kind of all going to consolidate together almost, and you're going to be seeing the same equipment used. So, I mean, I guess in that sense, like, if you don't have a true FTL, like, 26 pallets or 52, whatever the case may be, I mean, are you saying that, you think that the overall number of FTLs, like true FTLs that are out there, is going to kind of reduce because there's going to be ways to take advantage of that open capacity? If I have a trailer that's maybe like 18 pallets, and instead, can I fill that up with somebody else's order or somebody else's load?
Yeah, or even your own, or
Yeah.
like even right now, if you have 3 LTL shipments in an area, and then you're buying a 15 pallet full truckload, why don't you combine all 4 of those together and just do a multi-stop truckload?
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah. I think it'd be interesting too to see how Warp ties that all together. I was going to ask you the future of Warp, but you kind of tied it in there already. And you're basically going to be the one to be the catalyst to make all that happen and bring all those pieces together. So very interesting stuff with you here, Daniel, and really interesting to hear about how you kind of came to the idea of Warp and how Warp is changing the way LTL looks a little bit now, and now how it's going to play into the future as well. So what else can we expect from Warp in the future? I think you guys are raising some funds, right? So what's the goal there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just, kind of typical startup getting through fundraise process and things like that. I think, when I look at the future, I'm looking 3 to 5 years out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think fundraise is something right now for us. For us, 3 to 5 years out, I think we're right now kind of hitting a couple of topics, and we intersect on a couple of topics. We internally talk a lot about sustainability, right? I know that's a conversation that's kind of been on pause for a bit, just due to like skyrocketing interest rates and kind of overall what's been happening in the industry. But we're really excited about fleet electrification. I think there's massive opportunities there, and I think it comes with problems of its own, right? It used to plan that you could just stop at any gas station. No routing engine ever thought about charging stations. All of a sudden, you have to think about charging stations and the weight and the dimensions of that vehicle and how much range is remaining, and getting telematics information back to understand, maybe I got to put a charging station closer, or maybe I need to stop at this closer charging station instead of taking a risk and driving an additional 15 to 20 miles. So I think sustainability and fleet electrification is great, really interesting stuff. I think there's a lot of stuff going on around yard management just generally. I'm okay with yard management. I think it's like a need. I also don't think it's like such a huge problem. It's a problem for sure.
Yeah.
How big is it? That I don't know exactly, but we are solving it. Outside of that, I think it's also, I'm really excited about, like, how do you go out and actually change things up on the fly, right? So we've been able to really prove that moving from LA to New Jersey, or LA to Dallas to Atlanta, whatever it may be. But as we have more facilities, as we have more freight, the level of sophistication that we have really increases. And I think as long as we're able to really understand that sophistication, like really be able to like jot down formulas, jot down the numbers for them, we can offer flexibility as a result of that, right? Like, hey, here's a 1-day travel time for the same region. Here's a 3-day, here's a 5-day, here's a 1.5 day, right? And all these different options. And I think what's really about to be interesting is, how do you put that information back to the shipper, right? If somebody asks you for an LTL quote going from here to there, typically they get like 1 price or 3 prices or whatever. Now we may be able to provide them 25 different prices, right? And like, which one are they choosing from there, and what are they doing as a result of that? And I think that's a lot of interesting exploration that we have to do. But really, I think one of our big goals is, we really want to automate cross-docking. So we're really thinking and taking a hard look at, how do we get into the hardware for automation of cross-docking? How do we, get facilities that effectively are running either by robots or just, conveyance, right? Like automated conveyance and things like that. And personally, I think it's a combination of both of those things. And I think, we didn't talk about this, but there's this huge intersection happening at the same time of like connected automated vehicles, right? Like call it trucks, forklifts, all that kind of stuff. Software and digital infrastructure that powers and makes decisions on all of these, and humanoid robots. That right now it's just kind of like this, like, big, hairy, audacious goal of ours. But I'd love to see a humanoid robot in a warehouse. Let's see what happens with that. It should be interesting. So I don't know, just it's a lot of stuff happening. I think the big thing is that I think equally, we want to prepare for the future on one side and understand what it looks like. But at the same time, we also want to create the future, right? I think that's what we're all here for, is going out and changing the way that we think things are going, or having an impact to what things happen in the future. So, if all can go as we plan, you end up having, by 2030, we have a multimodal kind of mode agnostic network that's able to effectively deliver not just in the US and North America, but hopefully internationally as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all those technologies kind of coming together and having that intersection, like you said, is such an exciting thing. And I mean, it certainly makes it, exciting to be working in this space and seeing all these technologies kind of find these practical applications within our world, and being able to see how they're going to continue to evolve our world as well. And, definitely very interested to see kind of that automation on the cross-dock side too, and how that plays out. And it'd be interesting to see how Warp is a part of all that too in the next couple years, as you mentioned. And, very interesting to learn all about Warp today, and what you guys are doing currently and looking forward to in the future as well. So I really appreciate you joining me on the show, Daniel, and talking to us today. If people are interested in learning more about Warp or getting in touch, what's the best way to do that?
Our domain name is wearewarp.com, wearewarp.com. My personal email is daniel@wearewarp.com. Feel free to go to our website, sign up, book a call, email me directly, LinkedIn, whatever other means of communication. If you can find my phone number on a leads engine, feel free to call.
All right, go for it, everybody. So we're going to put that information at thenewwarehouse.com so people can easily find those websites. And Daniel, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.